Oh no. Oh no, please, just no. Let me quickly find some. Yep. Netflix's Devil May Cry is, well, it's bad. And I felt like the things that I find issue with have been spoken about at length by others, which is why I never bothered to post this originally. But now the landscape has changed a bit, with a 96% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb. I am sufficiently enough of a contrarian to give my opinion. And besides, my experience with reviewing media has grown since my first attempt at this video. So, let's get to it. As an exploration of American imperialism and humanity, Adi Shankar's Devil May Cry is middling at best. As an adaptation of the stories, characters, and ideas of Devil May Cry, it's less than mediocre. Let's begin by taking the story of Netflix's Devil May Cry at face value. We're going to ignore the games as much as possible and take a look at the show on its own merits. The central message that this series attempts to convey concerns American imperialism. Specifically, the story acts as an unsettled critique of America as a whole. Adi Shankar announced in late 2021 that the scripts for this first season had been completed.
All of the season 1 scripts are done, so yay.
Indeed.
I collaborated with a very talented...
This lines up similarly with the 20-year anniversary of the start of the global war on terror, a controversial time in which America was starting wars in the name of defending themselves from attacks of terror. But these wars also led to the harvesting of highly valuable resources from the lands they were, quote-unquote, protecting themselves from. I'd like to use this as a launching off point, as these were likely the ideas present in the public consciousness when the script was being written. We can feel this context throughout the first episode, an episode that is peppered with jabs at the current and historical state of America. A mention of Saddam Hussein questioning America's role as global policeman, showing the incompetence of American news and the existence of a secret American agency that's totally just here to protect America from demonic forces. The writers satirize elements of America's existing political climate, using humor to poke fun at real people through caricatures that highlight the self-righteous and conceited attitudes that America has towards itself. They make fun of American talk shows. This part of the critique is okay, it's even funny in some places, but if this critique wasn't explicit enough, the first season ends with the Americans gaining access to hell, and completely invading and colonizing it under pretenses of the dangers of the demons, while suspiciously collecting some kind of material from hell, while American Idiot by Green Day plays. It's boisterous, it's loud, and it lacks tact. It doesn't offer the audience anything of note relating to real-world history, just a bland showing of atrocities that we're capable of. It doesn't even ask us to look at the story from the perspective of those hurt. It asks us to look at it as civilians watching other people do things. It feels like it wants us to develop a white savior complex instead of any actual empathy about the mirrors of these real-world events. It feels plastic and attempts to be evocative without actually being successful in any way. It doesn't help that this show shovels it in your face with the subtlety of a sword through your chest. The song choice in particular always makes me laugh. It's in line with the aesthetic of the series, but its attempt at satire goes so overboard it manages to sand down all of the rough edges that it intends to portray. Oh, speaking of going overboard on things that don't matter in ways that inevitably undermine interesting thoughts, Mary. Her story is about being brainwashed by the institution and being used as its slave to commit atrocities. It's a tragedy. It's an interesting starting off point. And I don't think it works. Mary is given many chances and even more reasons to change herself over the course of the story. She takes steps forward that feel impactful, but her backsliding often feels like it's out of nowhere. Mary's starting off point in her introduction is as the pride of the righteous army, not just a show of her skill, but her devotion to the cause that Baines regards as righteous. She fights and captures Dante at the beginning of the series. Regardless of his clearly human lineage, her belief is that his demon nature makes him volatile and evil. And who can blame her? Her backstory shows that the pursuit of demonic power was the thing that took everything away from her. This is the status quo for Mary. Midway through the series, however, she is close to death, being chased by the demon Cavalier. Escaping from Cavalier, she encounters refugees trapped within the building, demons, and they take her in and save her despite knowing that she wishes to kill their kind. Once she survives the ordeal, in an act of real character growth, she frees the demons, promising to protect them. This is an evocative catalyst for a growth with payoff that feels earned, if not a little cliché. And again, toward the finale of the show, when confronted with the biggest victim of her actions, when confronted by the person who she radicalized, it feels like she begins to understand. She begins to see that she was a demon in another person's story. She sees how dark calm influenced her. She denies it. Her worldview shatters in front of her. So, with the finale of the series, with the opposition defeated and her and Dante set up to hunt demons, her final heel turn is anticlimactic. She's given a point early in the final episode in which she is told to capture Dante, but she hesitates before being interrupted by the big bad. But later on in the episode, after Dante has shown his worth to humanity, shown his want to defeat the demons, and saved Mary once or twice, she turns on him instantly, with hardly any empathy, with no flashback to her understanding of her past, not even with any seeding of her having to make this decision during the battle that had just happened. This is a predictable twist with a horrible execution that does so little for the themes of the story. It feels wrong, and it feels like a betrayal of the audience's time and effort to try and grow closer to this character. Which is hard, by the way. Up to this point, I haven't mentioned the elephant in the room with Mary's character. Her dialogue. The story frames her as this badass that can keep up with Dante through ingenuity and wit. The story frames her in a way that almost makes me feel like they want us to see Mary as a Leon Kennedy kind of figure. The way they show this to us? Lots of swearing. Like every sentence. Like, it sounds stupid.
M-I-fucking-A when a Roger fucking rabbit motherfucker fucking.
Some people like to insist that it's a mask she wears, but the story would have to give the audience reasonable precedent for that. Which it doesn't. Not really. You know what, though? If we're being kind, Mary's final betrayal can be perceived as a doubling down on the power of propaganda, as well as American brainwashing. But that doesn't change the fact that the execution is poor, her intentions behind each action feel disparate, and she feels pathetically immune to change in a way that feels like an insult to the audience for even expecting it from her. But there's something interesting here. This is about American imperialism, but for the most part, Americans are the only humans in the story. This means that, as a whole, the struggle between America and Makai is more than that. It's reframed as a struggle between humanity and demonkind. Now, what does that tell us about humanity? In Netflix's Devil May Cry, humanity is evil. Every human character we see is either self-serving or a dog to a cause they don't understand. By framing America alone without any meaningful representation of any other cultures or identities, Netflix's Devil May Cry turns a critique of America into a critique of humanity, refusing to show any goodness in its human characters. The demons of Devil May Cry are displaced refugees being killed for trying to escape a tyrant. Humans indiscriminately had killed demons, then, after killing one of their freedom fighters, invaded their land. Not to liberate them, but to drain them dry. This is the stance that Devil May Cry takes on humanity. Which is okay. There are many stories that say humanity is inherently evil. But Devil May Cry decidedly takes the stance that the only chance for goodness that humanity has is through demonic intervention. The show seemingly never chooses to show the positive traits of a character until they've been in some kind of interaction with the demonic entity, which, even if unintentionally, is a statement unto itself. Enzo. Enzo is a pathetic piece of trash moneylender. His defining character trait is being a loser that'll do anything to save his own skin. He's friends with Dante because he's a good gun for hire, and Enzo even throws him under the bus twice. Both times he goes to make amends with Dante, not because he actually cares, but because he's afraid of him. Over the course of the story, being saved by Dante and being around demons allows him to make a sacrifice for Dante's life. Normally, I think that this sacrifice is a nothing burger, but it genuinely feels like Enzo had been affected by the Makaians, which continues to leave us with a single idea. Humans bad, demons good. And with that, let's talk about our quote-unquote protagonist, Dante. Dante is a mix of demon and human. That means if the story is exploring that dichotomy, he should have some mix of human and demon traits, and that mix places him as an intermediary between the two sides, placing him at the center of the conflict. A lot of stories that have this setup would make him the protagonist of the story, but more on that later. At the beginning of the story, Dante is loud, brash, and cool. He has very few actually redeeming qualities aside from saving that one lady once, but he never feels like he has that much going for him in that regard. We aren't controlling Dante, so we need a reason to care about him. Except that we don't get one. He has charisma and aura, but that's about it. It feels like Dante gets his primary good qualities when he accepts his demon side. Which is funny, he goes from brash and unwieldy to witty and reliable pretty much instantly. It genuinely feels like a switch-up of his character that isn't super substantiated, and it feels doubly weird with the aforementioned weird split between humanity and demonkind. It doesn't feel like he goes through an arc, it feels like he decides to accept it, and then he does. It feels weird, it feels unearned, and Devil Trigger isn't even his song. I mean, it feels rushed. Now, looking at Devil May Cry as a whole standalone series, I only have a few things to say. I believe that it's generally not great at getting its point across, even when it assassinates its characters to do so. I think that there are things that the authors hide in subtext that are either unintentional or unhelpful. The rhetoric of humanity bad has about as much depth as a Mickey Mouse Clubhouse episode. Even if you mix the two thematic through lines to make it about the dehumanization that America does, it feels like it doesn't put the effort in, and as such, doesn't earn it. Now, let's discuss the show within the context of being an adaptation of Devil May Cry. Let's start with what they nail perfectly. Devil May Cry is aesthetic. There's no doubt that they have it down to a T. The Gothic buildings, the A&B era music, and even the sound effects and action choreography call back to watching Dante taunt creatures far scarier than him. And while I was rewatching the series for this video, I never really skipped the opening, not once. It's amazing, it feels like Devil May Cry. I hate how they're using it to set up Ebony and Ivory, but Dante breaking guns by pressing the triggers too hard feels like a Devil May Cry bit straight out of a cutscene. The first few times it happens, it got a laugh out of me. The only complaint I have with the aesthetics themselves are the sleek futurism of Darkcom. I feel like they still could have gone Gothic with the organization, especially with its name and all. None of the characters on the Darkcom side feel particularly interesting visually, and all the tech stuff just feels weird. Let Mary do the cool tricks and acrobatics Lady did. But otherwise, hey, the aesthetics of the show look, sound, and feel awesome. Genuinely some amazing work done here. The covers of Devil's Never Cry and Devil Trigger are awesome, even if I despise the use of Devil Trigger for Dante. Look, it's great. But, unluckily for us, and unluckily for Adi Shankar, when you adapt a piece of fiction, you don't just take its aesthetics. You also take its themes and characters and all that baggage with them. It's super clear that the show wanted to do a Devil May Cry 3. It wants to show audiences Dante's origin story through a younger, less controlled version of himself. The main conflict is with Dante learning how to accept his demonic heritage, and they choose to introduce Lady as a foil and somewhat opposing force. It feels like they just decided to take all the surface level things, but we'll get to that. So let's compare this story to Devil May Cry 3. There are two primary through lines that intertwine with each other throughout the story of the third game, as well as what I believe to be an important element of Devil May Cry as a whole. But let's start with those two. The exploration of familial responsibility and vulnerability in our protagonists of Dante and Lady. Then we'll compare this to their anime counterparts and see what goes well, see what doesn't. Spoilers for DMC3, by the way. Lady is the character that was, quite unflatteringly, adapted into the character of Mary. Lady's father is Arkham, one of the demons assisting Vergil in merging the demon and human worlds, but once he was a human like her. Using dark rituals, he turned himself into a demon by killing his wife, Lady's mother. She hates demons because she has seen the evil that demonic power can bring into the world. She has even renounced the name her father gave her. This is her status quo as she enters the demon tower Temenigru. Sound familiar? If I were to summarize, her story is about already knowing the responsibility that comes with family, but being able to accept vulnerability in order to carry that out. One of the most important scenes to understand Lady's character arc and trajectory is the end of Mission 10, in which Lady encounters Dante standing over the quote-unquote dead body of her father Arkham. She lashes out at Dante, attempting to kill him. She shouts about Arkham's evil actions. She says that Arkham is her father, and as such it was her responsibility to kill him. But as she stands over her father's body, she can't shoot him. And as he wakes, he is able to manipulate her. Lady's strength is real, but her brashness is a mask. Her lack of vulnerability and ability to understand herself stops her from acting in line with her values. She finds excuses not to follow through on her responsibility because she cannot admit that despite being driven to kill her own father, there is grief behind killing the final member of her family. After being tricked into starting her father's ritual, her sense of familial responsibility grows.
But I couldn't. I'm responsible for all this mess.
Responsible? Does it bother you that much?
He's my father. Besides, who else can undo what he's done?
Her arc reaches a climax in Mission 16. Put a bookmark here, this isn't the last time it'll be mentioned. She's tired and hurt, and she's clearly no longer able to continue on her journey. She's been heavily injured multiple times by this point and doesn't have the regenerative physiology that Dante or Vergil have. Dante tells her to go home, and that he'll finish off the journey for her. At this moment, Lady hits an important point of growth. She doesn't tell Dante why she needs to kill Arkham. She doesn't talk about him being a demon and her being a human. She doesn't talk about her familial responsibility. She says that her soul screams to kill him because she is driven by the inability to forgive him. She doesn't explain why she must kill him, but why she will kill him. Put a pin in this idea about her soul as well. Dante can't let her go on like this, so these two idiots communicate in the only way they can, by fighting. In the end, Dante defeats Lady, he shares his own vulnerability with her, and promises he will finish it. Lady gives him the Kalia-an, the symbol of her mother, who is, in and of herself, a symbol for Lady's responsibility. She lets him help her, and she collapses, allowing herself to be helped by another person, and allowing that weight to be taken off her back. Once Arkham is taken care of by Dante and Vergil, Lady finds him pleading for forgiveness. In this moment, she is both able to understand her soul's intent and her responsibility as the daughter of this villain. She shoots him. Then she cries. This grief is part of her character, and by finding vulnerability, she is able to take the action she needed to take. Her final words to her father are,
Help me, Mary.
Mary died a long time ago. My name is Lady. Goodbye, Father.
This is a really cool evolution of her character. She has found a world without her vengeance. She renounced her name because she hated the father that gave it to her, but she has found a new name because now she can live on in a world without him. She has been reborn. And at the end of the game, Lady says a line that I can't decide whether or not I think is amazing or goofy.
Maybe somewhere out there even a devil may cry when he loses a loved one. Don't you think?
I've since come to the conclusion that it is both amazing and goofy, making it the truest form of Devil May Cry. Over the course of the story, she has learned through her father that humanity is capable of immense evil, not through demonic influence, but through greed. Lady saying this is an affirmation of her own growth, not just recognizing that humanity isn't inherently good, but opening her mind to understand that maybe that means that devil kind isn't inherently evil. I think that Mary and Netflix's Devil May Cry sharing a name and character design with Lady from Devil May Cry 3 is an insult to the story that the latter told. The first part of this discussion is this. Why choose Lady? Why was Lady chosen for the story being told by Shankar? And I can give an answer. It's because the writers saw that the story of Devil May Cry 3 is Dante's origin story, and they saw that Lady was an important part of that story. They don't make an attempt to keep any of her characterization, nor do they attempt to keep the important parts of her story. As discussed previously, Mary, as opposed to Lady, isn't brash and reckless. She's plain unlikable. She's confronted with change at every point, but never budges. She never feels like she has any responsibility to the world or to others aside from being loyal to Darkcom. She never feels like she's anything more than her hatred for demons. One of Lady's greatest features is her humanity, especially in the fact that she can't keep up with Dante or Vergil. Lady has to reckon with her humanity and choose to struggle against forces far stronger than her, and that's what makes her asking for help feel that much better. Netflix's Mary is able to go toe-to-toe with Dante. She beats him consistently. She is smarter and faster than him, but she never gets overworked or stressed out. Her mask doesn't feel like a mask because over the course of 8 30-minute episodes, she never feels like a real person. She feels like a hollow impression of Lady, keeping the competence and badassery, but extracting the struggle and the weakness that lies behind those things. To add some perspective, Shankar doesn't do anything interesting with Mary's character over the course of about 4 hours, which is more than double the amount of time it would take to watch all the cutscenes from Devil May Cry 3. Now, let's talk about our protagonist. Dante is the son of the legendary demon knight Sparda, who defected from his people and saved humanity by separating the human and demon worlds. Sparda had 2 children shortly afterwards, gifting them with keepsakes before disappearing. In the demon's retaliation, Ava, Sparda's wife, had been able to protect one of their sons, but died protecting the other. Dante was the one who was saved that night. He grew to despise demons and despise his father, but his hatred of demons means that he hates himself as a half-demon. He grows up to hunt the things that he hates, and when his twin brother summons the demon tower Teminagru, he ascends the tower out of hatred for demonkind and rivalry with his brother. That's where we find him. Being the point of view character, Dante has a few big turning points in his arc, but his first happens in Mission 7. Dante confronts his brother atop the tower Teminagru, and in their rivalry they battle. Dante is humanity and Vergil is demonkind. Vergil asks why he doesn't accept their father's power, and Dante responds with,
Father? I don't have a father.
Vergil beats Dante, and in an act of victory, stabs Dante with the sword that Sparda gave to him. Rebellion. Dante is reunited properly with the gift his father gave him, and he is able to unlock the true extent of his double powers. He begins to see the power it gives him, and it feels like he can take on Vergil. He has tapped into a power that he intends to wield recklessly, as he does when he wanders into the mouth of a demon while showing off. When he comes across the body of Arkham, Lady's speech about her father being her responsibility sticks with him, an idea that he scoffs at, but is the seed planted for his joint character growth with her. When he encounters Beowulf, a demon obsessed with hunting down Sparta and his descendants, Dante reckons with the idea of having a responsibility to deal with the remnants of what his father did, not just have the power involved with that lineage. Dante learning the truth behind his necklace is important. Sparta gave a necklace to each of the two brothers. When brought together, they have the potential to open the portal that Sparta closed to protect humanity. Dante now knows the power he has, and the intent behind chasing Vergil changes. It's not completely about the feud. It's about an understanding of knowing what the demon power he has means, a responsibility to clean up Sparta's mess. We can return to Mission 16. Dante confronts the weakened Lady. She opens up to him, and they fight. Dante hears what Lady has to say before battling her. He hears what she says about her soul screaming out. But in Lady's vulnerability, Dante finds it in himself to drop his own veneer of confidence and arrogance. He tells Lady that this is just as much his family matter as hers, and that he can do this for her. Not only does he take one element of his familial responsibility, he takes responsibility for taking care of those who try to replicate his father. Dante ends the scene by affirming the relationship he has with Lady.
Quite frankly, at first, I didn't give a damn. But because of you, I know what's important now.
He was taught about power from Vergil, but taught about responsibility from Lady. And only once she found it in herself to drop her facade could Dante do the same. After dealing with Arkham, Dante and Vergil stand off with one another. One final fight. Dante is protecting their father's legacy, while Vergil is pursuing their father's power. And Dante says something very familiar.
We are the sons of Sparta. Within each of us flows his blood. But more importantly, his soul! And now, my soul is saying it wants to stop you!
Dante fuses his own personal responsibility with Lady's remarks about the way her soul screams what she wants. Dante's soul is screaming to stop Vergil, and that is still his desire. But that also comes from their father. That desire comes from the fact that he knows his father's power wasn't meant to be used for this. In an incredible way, he mirrors Lady.
I have to stop you, even if that means killing you.
And, similarly to Lady, Dante does complete his familial responsibility. He beats Vergil, but he still goes to save him, and when he can't, Dante cries for his brother. But when Lady asks if he's crying, he just responds with,
Devils never cry.
Dante still hates his demon nature, and that hate is a through line of his character all the way up to DMC5. But Lady responds with,
Maybe somewhere out there even a devil may cry when he loses a loved one. Don't you think?
and Dante is able to see his own humanity again, vulnerable still, but also accepting of his entire self and aware of what the power of his father means his responsibility is. Dante is driven by style and fun, but also his own responsibility and hatred for demonkind. Netflix's Dante never feels like he hates demons. Despite being cursed with the blood of one of the creatures that kills his mother and brother, you never feel like he has a purpose. And that's because they give him almost zero meaningful fights with them before unlocking his double trigger. An iconic element of Dante's character comes in how he taunts the various demons he comes up against, regardless of their intimidating presence or power.
Wow, I've never seen a talking mud before.
Dante's taunts aren't just for style, they're an undermining of the power of the creature in front of him. Dante's taunts are insults towards the demons for one, but also subtextual hints at Dante's own inner nature, hiding the scared little boy from that night, by pretending his assailants have no power over him. Netflix Dante's taunts are either shallow characterizations of himself or just plainly not subtextual or clever in any way.
Like being a demon, you have to be evil!
Netflix's Dante gets bored on jobs and can't beat American soldiers in tactical gear. His hate for his own demon heritage is set up so poorly that most people I've seen discuss the show miss the fact that Dante is in denial about his heritage, and just assume he doesn't know. Dante's identity crisis is the core of the story that they're telegraphing in every way that they want to tell. Netflix's Dante unlocks his Devil Trigger, and that's it. It feels like it's the end of his growth for the season. Dante unlocks his Devil Trigger, then comes to terms with the power, then has to come to terms with the responsibility of that power, as well as what that means for his heritage. Netflix chooses to keep the cinematic beats, but skips over the parts that are evocative of any emotion that isn't a hype. There's a scene in the original Devil May Cry 3 that I forgot about until I was doing the research for this video. Dante comes up against this demon that is a shadow, and that shadow imitates Dante. When it approaches him, Dante doesn't speak loudly or brashly. Dante speaks in a relatively serious tone of voice, and he says this.
I know why you're here. You're here to ask me some questions. Well, too bad. I've already answered them myself. I don't need you anymore.
The MC3 Dante is his identity crisis. He doesn't know who he is. When he looks at a mirror of himself, he asks himself questions, but he can never get a good answer from his reflection. But he keeps asking. By the end of the game, he finds those answers within himself. He finds who he is, and so he doesn't need to speak to that reflection anymore. He doesn't need that darkness in his heart. Netflix Dante skips the questions. He's a human who denies his demon side 1 second and a hybrid the next. He doesn't look himself in the mirror to ask himself what he is. Netflix Dante feels like he exists in a vacuum. He has nothing to compare himself in the story we're given. We don't get to see his mirror. We don't get to see the person who responds when he asks what he is. We don't get to see the reflection that shows him his worst self. We don't get to see Vergil. Spoilers for all of the games, except Devil May Cry 2. I haven't played it. Vergil haunts the entirety of Devil May Cry in a way that is usually highly important to the story. He is a mirror of Dante that always exists and has some presence in showing the extreme of who Dante is or what he could be. I read Devil May Cry 1 as a game about familial trauma, and Dante overcoming and conquering that. One of the most important bosses in the game is Nelo Angelo, who is revealed to be Vergil after he's beaten. In order to survive and overcome his family trauma, he needs to beat Nelo Angelo. He has to look his brother, who allowed his life to be ruled by trauma, in the eyes, and he has to overcome that. Vergil shows Dante what unresolved trauma looks like and how that can corrupt him. Devil May Cry 3 shows Vergil as the opposite of Dante, more accepting of his demonic side than his human side. He shows that if Dante doesn't embrace both sides of himself, he will become a twisted and unstable version of himself. Vergil shows Dante what the pursuit of power without responsibility looks like. Devil May Cry 4 doesn't feature Vergil, but it does feature his blade, the Yamato, as a stand-in for him. Dante gives the Yamato to Nero, who is set up in this game to be the future protagonist of the Devil May Cry franchise. Dante gives it to Nero because Devil May Cry 4 is a game about passing the torch, and as we've discussed throughout this section, what is more integral to Dante than his relationship with Vergil? The Yamato shows how Dante is able to pass on what he knows and who he is to others, acting as a guide and hopefully sparing them from the pain he went through. And Devil May Cry 5 as a whole is about the duality of these characters and their unresolved story with one another, an entirely different can of worms for a different day. Vergil barely appears in Netflix's rendition of the story. He is used as a way to tease the audience who know him through aura farming edits and his iconic theme. He's there to make audiences say, "Hey, look, it's Vergil," and we can feel his absence in the story. The audience is never able to see what Dante fears he could become. We never get to see a look into a Dante who is consumed by his demonic heritage. The weight of Dante making decisions about where he will place himself is lessened because Vergil's presence isn't there to inform the audience about Dante's internal thoughts, and as such, Netflix's Dante is relegated to cheesy one-liners and venting his confusion about his demonic heritage to a random demon. Yeah. In conclusion, I think Netflix's Devil May Cry isn't a good adaptation of Devil May Cry's storylines, and especially shows a lack of understanding for the things it tries to emulate. Now, before anyone says it's only been a season, we should cut them some slack. A season should be like a full book, with the episodes being the chapters. If I read an entire book and the author tries to tell me that it's okay, because the book is bad, because the sequel might be better, it's an insult to the audience's time. Having said that, seeing the newest trailer for the next season fills me with some kind of relief. We see Vergil, we see a good action sequence, we see some of Dante's past, and despite how I've been burned before, I find myself excited. Despite how much I've hated the previous trailers, this one slightly spoke to me, despite the contrast of derivative usage of dialogue from the games and some generally bland dialogue. Despite all that, I'm still willing to give Adi Shankar's Devil May Cry another shot. But hey, speaking of him, in the original version of the script, written a few days after the show dropped, I had a joke where I called Adi Shankar a hack. The joke was a relic of the time when everyone was blowing up about the show. The point of it was that I didn't really want to discuss Shankar and just judge his work on its own merits. The reason I removed that joke wasn't because it was in bad taste. It was. Or that it was an unfunny joke. It also was. It's because I decided I want to talk about Adi Shankar. Adi Shankar is not a bad director or executive producer by a long shot. He's alright, and depending on how you view his filmography, you might decide he's good. He was most well known at one point for Dread, a film that I haven't seen, but I've heard good things about. Then he was known for Castlevania. This is a show that I have watched and thought was okay. It has some genuinely amazing moments throughout it, but there are also points where it feels like nothing is happening and such. It's important to note that a good amount of Castlevania fans weren't a fan of it, despite its relative success, and you can see that exact same problem in Devil May Cry. Okay, now let's talk about Adi Shankar's character. This will be important. First things first, he's a self-proclaimed visionary. I've personally never heard of anyone calling him this aside from his Twitter bio, but if there's proof of that happening, let me know. He's also gone on record that the release of Devil May Cry 5 made him unhappy because he wanted to be the person to revive the franchise.
And I love this niche
That's
thing.
the most important
and now
thing
I
that-
can
yeah.
take it and hopefully blow it up to a point where I can expand it and there'll be more of it.
Yep.
Right? So and I didn't know that there was a Devil May Cry 5 coming out.
You didn't know?
No.
Wow.
I got
okay.
actually unhappy when they so I signed the deal and I'm like, yeah, great, I'm doing it. And then they're like, good news, we have Devil May Cry 5 coming out.
Were you hoping to play it before doing your adaptation? Is that what you're saying? Or you just...
No, I actually thought the franchise was dead.
Oh.
Implying that the franchise is dead and that he wanted to be the guy who revived it, who brought it back. He talks about how big of a fan he is, but with a reaction like that, his claims of fandom fall flat. Because how could you not be excited for one of the greatest games of the decade? Especially if it's a franchise you claim to love. And now, back to the interview from the beginning. This sort of puts a nail in the coffin for me. Adi Shankar wants to create something iconic. He wants to create the Castlevania reviver. He wants to create the Devil May Cry reviver. He wants to create something that can be compared to The Dark Knight. This is why he takes an existing IP. This is why, apparently, according to Shankar, he's begun development on an Assassin's Creed show, a Hyper Light Drifter show, a PUBG show, and a Duke Nukem show. Because he wants to create something perceived as great. He wants to create something iconic. And to do that, he's taking IPs that he believes are inactive and dead. He wants to artificially create greatness by taking things he deems to be outdated and reforming them in the way he wants to. In reality, he's looking down on the things he chooses to adapt and the fans willing to support a thing that they love. It's like that one arcane quote, "In the pursuit of great, we fail to do good." Adi Shankar has great plans and sometimes these shows are okay, but it never feels like he works with the IPs in mind. He's using them to propel himself. He's using them to make himself look like this visionary creator. He's taking IPs and changing them drastically to modernize, and sometimes westernize, but we're not ready for that conversation, them, regardless of whether or not that shows reverence for the IPs he's using. Now, if you want to see a show that uses an IP to show some real love to it, to draw in fans, sure, but also tell a story both unique and in line with its source material, do you want to see a real love letter? An anime for Yokusaro Shibata's Tojima Wants to Be a Kamen Rider has begun airing recently, and it's awesome. The anime format captures such a love for Kamen Rider and Tokusatsu that all of the emotions are infectious. Okay, there are some things that are hard to buy in on. Most specifically, it's a very male gaze show, female characters with exaggerated proportions and all that. Anime stuff. I can admit that this is a part of the show I don't like, but I can still say that it is an amazing show. Tanzaburo Tojima has been a fan of the Tokusatsu, think Power Rangers, show Kamen Rider since he was a kid. He's looked up to the writer in his battles against the villains known as Shocker. He has trained his body for combat to do the famous Kamen Rider moves, like I'm sure we've all done as kids. But now he's a 40-year-old man who's devoted his entire life to Kamen Rider. He's alone, and he's what most of the world would call a loser. But one day, he sees a robbery taking place, with the robbers impersonating combatant villains from Shocker. And he buys a shoddy Kamen Rider mask, puts it on, and he gets to live his dream. Tojima Wants to Be a Kamen Rider tells a story about loving its source material. It's a story about drama and heroism, just like Kamen Rider, but it's also a story about community, about the power of fiction to change our lives. It's a story about the way that fictional characters can give us confidence or comfort us through hard times, and how, despite those things being fiction, you can still embody them. You get to see these grown-ass adults shouting attack names and lovingly animated recreations of moments from the original Kamen Rider, with all the jank and weird effects and camera shots lovingly replicated in animation. This is what it looks like to create a story about something you love. Yokusaru Shibata shows the audience what love for Kamen Rider looks like, and, faults and all, I would prefer to throw my money at a labor of love like this over something like Netflix's Devil May Cry. Now that I'm done with that, let me quickly see what other people were thinking about the anime. Wait, is that a Foxcade video from 2 months ago? It's about Adi Shankar, and he's better researched than me, and it covers more topics.